Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of Nick Talks. This week, I've gone international. My guest is from New York City, over the pond in the great US of A, and he's called Carbon Mike. I'll introduce him in a minute. Mike reached out to me in the summer of 2020 after I'd been cancelled, sacked from my charity, fought back and got my job back. Many people reached out at that point, and I decided I was going to talk to and meet anybody who wanted to talk or meet me. I met lots of people in Manchester and Greater Manchester, and I went on 2 podcasts in America talking about what happened to me, and Mike was one of those gents who contacted me and wanted to chat through what happened. We had a great conversation. I'd like to think we became internet friends, and I've been on this podcast now maybe 4 times, where we have conversations up to 2 hours long about social issues, young people, crime, and especially personal responsibility. And that's something we've definitely got in common. So first of all, welcome, Mike, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So first of all, if you could just explain to the listeners and viewers why you've got an avatar and not your face is on the screen.
Well, mainly it's because of what happens to you, what happens to people like you, with the prevailing culture being what it is. If you have beliefs that don't follow the mainstream, you can find yourself having a lot of professional problems in your job, for example. And I couldn't afford that in my industry. So I decided when I started to do internet politics, I decided to go with an avatar and never let my face be photographed.
And that's, if you'd asked me that 2.5 years ago, I would have been quite surprised, and I would not have understood what you were talking about. But through personal experience, I fully understand what you mean now. And some people in their profession, in their lives, can't take that chance of being cancelled and losing everything they've worked for. So it's not a problem on this podcast. So thank you for coming along. I think the first question for me really is, how did you hear about my story, and what made you reach out across the Atlantic to speak to somebody in Manchester in England?
Yeah, so when I was, as I recall it, I think I heard about your story through my Twitter feed. It was one of the news items that came up either on my Twitter feed or on kind of like the general kind of news feed that I cobbled together. So when Black Lives Matter became a thing, when they started to rise to prominence, the first thing I did was go and read their manifesto. And right there, warning, that was a warning flag right there, like alarm bells started going off. It's like, these people are not right. And then so when I saw your story, when I saw there was a guy in England who had been kicked out of his own charity for pointing out what I had already known was the truth about Black Lives Matter, I was like, I've got to talk to this guy. And that was the start of it. Yeah.
And can I just confirm that I've always guessed with your pseudonym being Carbon Mike, am I right in guessing that you're a black man?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Born and raised.
Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't change it.
That's
you can't
right.
enhance it. You
That's
are
right.
who you are.
That's
so
right.
Across the pond, we had a black American who'd already looked into Black Lives Matter, and you'd realise they weren't the organisation they were pretending to be. What things did you discover that made you question and start really thinking about what they were about?
Well, the number one thing is that they were hostile to families, to traditional families.
That was exactly the thing that triggered me. I could handle them being communist and Marxist. I could handle them being 3 lesbian, queer women. I could handle all that. What got me was they didn't want the nuclear family.
That's correct. I would say, and the only place I differ from you is that I don't really, given my heritage and various things, I actually think the nuclear family is put it this way, it's the traditional family, the extended family. That's the thing we all grew up in, where you grew up in a neighborhood where people knew you, there were eyes on the street, you had aunts and uncles and what have you. And the the fact that these people wanted to go after that and destroy it as a structure, especially being a Black American and having been, not just Black, but like politically conscious for a long time. I used to be on the left, but even when I was on the left, Black issues mattered to me. It's just I didn't understand that the left didn't really have the solution, and nor does the right. The solution comes from strong families. So anybody who's against families, anybody who is against the married family and who's against these kinds of things that have kept us strong as Black people over decades and decades, anyone who's against that is my enemy as far as I'm concerned. So I'll pause there, but yeah.
No, I completely agree. The fact that every culture around the world today has come to that same conclusion means it must be the right conclusion. We've tried experiments before, we've tried the kibbutz in Israel, where children were raised communally. But once you look at that, they've really all collapsed now. Why did they collapse? Because those children grew up slightly dysfunctional because they didn't pair bond with the parents. There was lots of sexual abuse, and there was lots of favoritism within different caregivers. And that's why the kibbutz in Israel all stopped raising their children together. We've tried these experiments, they don't work. Children need a mother and a father.
That's correct.
They're both equal. They both bring different things to the table, but you need both of them. You can do it by yourself, but just because you can do something by yourself doesn't mean that should be done. It takes two parents. And I remember growing up listening to an African proverb which says, it takes a village to raise a child. And the more I thought about that, especially the last 2 years, the more I realised it's incorrect. It takes two parents to raise a child. It takes a village to socialise a child. We need extended families, we need the village, we need the community. They all should be involved, but they're never a replacement for your mum and dad.
This is the thing. Yeah. And this is where a lot of people get bogged down, because then when you say, if you've ever listened to Peter Hitchens, who I'm a big fan of, he'll say the same thing. The married family is the core, so on and so forth. People say, well, but single parent, I was raised by a single parent and I did fine. And that's all true. Good outcomes are possible, okay, if you don't have an ideal background. But that's not the ideal. The ideal is children being raised in the married family. Like I said, I'm with you as far as that being the core. It's also true that in places where, if you talk to, for example, there's a lot of Black people from the Caribbean in the UK, right? And if you talk to a lot of them, they'll tell you that back home in the old country, even when there was dysfunction in the family, the extended family was able to function as a backup, but that's still the core, the married family. And so once again, anyone who's against that, especially if they're claiming to be pro-Black, as far as I'm concerned, is full of it.
No, and I completely agree. And especially around the extended family. Sometimes we think the extended family is just about extra presents at Christmas and your birthday. But your extended family are there when your mum has to go to work, or your dad's sick, or your mum and dad can't cope anymore because you're going through something as a child, or they need a break. And that's what your extended family's for. They're extra support. Now, what most people don't realise is most animals die once their reproductive use is ended, because what's the point of them being around? Mammals, and especially the more intelligent mammals, including humans, our lives have extended, and we have to ask why. And I think the answer is because we have value to give the next generation, our grandchildren. We're there to help raise them and pass knowledge on to them. So we don't have reproductive value anymore, but we have educational value we need to give our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, and that's why we're still around at 60, 70, 80, 90.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, human beings have a very long childhood and a very long adolescence compared to most other creatures, mammals included. And so, yeah, you need adults around you. And this, just going back to Black Lives Matter for a second, there's this, I guess it's a socialist communist thing, this idea that parents can be dispensed with, and a family should be a democracy. Ironically, that's the one place they really like democracies. It's like these are all, it's like you said before, you can look at the outcomes. We've tried this. We've tried dispensing with the family. It doesn't work. These experiments, by the way, you don't have to go to the kibbutzim to see the failure of this experiment. I live in New York City. I can walk around in neighborhoods where the experiment has been tried and is being tried. Those neighborhoods are very unsafe to walk around. Why? Because the family has been destroyed. We have a problem with very high crime and a semi-permanent kind of subculture, a semi-permanent Black underclass in this country. It's not that we don't have a Black middle class. We do, okay? But the semi-permanent Black underclass is the underclass and is semi-permanent for one reason only. That's the destruction of the family. So the experiment has been run. We can see it all around us. You can see it on the evening news. The experiment has failed. And the question to me is, when are people going to wake up and realize that experiment is a failure and turn the blame on who is to blame, which is the same kind of liberals and progressives and the Black Lives Matterists that are calling for more of the same. So I'll pause there because I'm getting heated. But this is obviously this is a subject near and dear to my heart, because this is serious.
Again, I've got 2 decades frontline experience to back up exactly what you've said. Nearly every kid I've ever worked with who was getting involved in crime, who was being thrown out of school, who was dysfunctional, who'd failed education, who can't get a job, nearly every single one of them came from a single parent household. In the UK, in the jails, 75% of all prisoners come from single parent households. But in reality, only 14% of households in the UK are single parent. So you can see that they're overrepresented all the time in all the negativity. And that's not to blame single mums, because that's what you get accused of, blaming single mums.
That's what you get accused of, right?
But what we're trying to say is, this is a negative lifestyle. And we shouldn't be ashamed of saying this is a negative lifestyle, that we need to support people to stop them making the same mistakes as previous generations. But the left progressives say, that's victim shaming, that's blaming people, and we should never blame people because every lifestyle is as valuable as everybody else's. And I say completely, 100%, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. And listen, it's also important to point out, right? Because people, especially, it's funny, and like, look, as a Black dude who is kind of conservative leaning, even though I have no use for either major party in my country, I'm definitely on the conservative side. It's funny to me, right, to see when cats like you talk about this stuff, the kinds of people who turn around and attack you for either being racist or blame, and people, most people on either side of the spectrum who haven't been the kind of places, maybe done the kind of things that you've done or I've done, don't understand how conservative ordinary working class people are in Black neighborhoods, for example. Like Black folks who work for a living, like, think all of this is nonsense. This idea that every lifestyle is just as valuable as every other lifestyle and everyone should be affirmed and no one should be shamed. This is nonsense. And people, right, go on. Sorry.
The most conservative people I ever meet are former homeless people and former unemployed benefit-seeking people.
Ain't that something?
Once you get them a job and they start earning their way and they get a pay packet with a wage slip in it, and they say to me, Nick, what's this bit here? And I go, it's tax. And they go, they've taken nearly a quarter of my wage away. And I go, that's tax. So that now pays for your other friends who don't work. That turns people conservative.
Ain't that something? Once
they realize I'm paying for those people. And I go, just like we used to pay for you.
Right. And it's not even that. I think you would agree that it's not even that we shouldn't have a state that helps people avoid the worst outcomes of bad luck or bad decisions or what have you. But it can't be that The state cannot prevent every bad outcome. That's one. And that has to be a transition. It can't be something that people learn to depend on. And I'm very sorry, people have learned to depend on this. That's not a knock on the people. They're following the incentives. They're following the money. Everyone follows the incentives. Everyone follows the money. But the point is that giving people things, and I know you've seen this in your frontline work, giving people things all the time and not expecting anything from them, and not trying to get them to discipline themselves. It destroys them spiritually. It just does.
Oh, absolutely. It eats away at their confidence, their self-worth, their self-respect. If you're a man, it eats away your masculinity and the feeling that you should be a provider and a protector. It's one of the worst things. I'm like you. I want a welfare state. I don't want people to have one or two bits of bad luck and they end up on the streets with their children. That's horrendous. But I want a system that gives you a hand up, not a handout.
Correct.
And in the UK, we have a system that traps you on benefits for decades and generations. And we do it through compassion and being kind. But all we're really doing is we're sacrificing your self-worth to make us feel better that you're being looked after. How condescending is that?
That's correct.
I would rather you have a crap life, but I feel better that I've looked after you because you can't look after yourself, but I feel better. And it's the wrong system completely.
That's right. And again, the people who are the biggest advocates, the people who will get up on their hind legs and attack you the loudest for being racist and what have you. Okay. These people, I know where these people don't live. Do you know what I'm saying? I know where they don't live.
Yeah, they don't live in the neighborhoods that I grew up in or the neighborhoods I work in today. They didn't grow up there.
Thank you. You don't see them in East New York. I can take you to the hot corners. I can take you to where you can hear gunshots on summer nights, sometimes when the block is getting hot. And these people don't want to live there. They don't want to teach in the schools that are populated by the children who come from destroyed families. Okay? Because even if they don't admit it out loud, they understand that a teacher's authority comes from the family. It doesn't come from the school board. Doesn't come from parliament, doesn't come from my state legislature or your local council or any of that other stuff.
It comes from, I'm going to tell your mum.
Exactly. That's correct. And when that is destroyed, look, in my country, there was a social critic. He passed away some time ago named Stanley Crouch. And he pointed out that not that long ago in my country, a school teacher, a female school teacher of any size and any color could control a student of any size and any color. Okay. That was because of the family. And if you destroy the family, you destroy society. You destroy society, all hell breaks loose. It's not because people don't have self-esteem. It's not because there's a black crime gene. It's not because of it's like the family is the foundation of civilization. It's really that simple. And again, when I saw you getting attacked, and I saw a couple other people too, but like yours stuck in my head because of specifically the kind of work you had done. I understood the kinds of neighborhoods you were walking around in, and I understood the kinds of people you were working with in the street. And so for people to attack you on that basis, again, for calling out what should have been obvious about Black Lives Matter, I said, I got to talk to this guy, got to.
So both our countries seem to have an issue with a lack of personal responsibility, a welfare state and welfare programs that do more harm than good. You've been speaking to a lot of English people since I've known you for at least 2 years. What other similarities do you think our countries have, especially in problems?
Well, I think it seems to me that as far as politics are concerned, let's take politics first. Neither the US nor the UK has a real conservative party. That's the first problem.
Oh, absolutely.
And neither country has a real liberal party to that. Like the left-leaning parties that are supposed to look out for the working man, the working family, what have you, in your country and mine, they despise working people. They hate them. They hate everything they stand for. And they've kind of relegated themselves to simply pandering to a relatively small group of very vocal activists. And that's their real quote unquote base. Well, that and their donors, that's their base. Now, we also don't have real conservatives. We also don't have a party, either you and the Tories or us with the Republican Party. We don't have conservatives who actually want to conserve anything. And that's a problem, And so a lot of us feel like we're politically homeless. When I talk to people in the UK, it's the same sentiment. When I talk to friends of mine over here, friends of mine over there, it's the same sentiment. They just feel like they're politically homeless.
That rings so many bells over here. Our Labour Party has nothing to do with Labour anymore, as in people who go out to work. They've not represented them now for several decades. And the biggest group now who vote for our Labour Party are middle class, educated university graduates.
There you go.
That tells you everything you need to know. And then we've got the Conservatives here who jump on every woke, trendy, progressive project they can think of. They want to go to net zero. In 12 years of Conservative government, we're sending men into women's prisons because they say they're women. And it's like, what's happened to Conservatives and what's happened to the Labour Party? Both parties just have gone off the edge of a cliff.
Yes, that's correct. And again, I have a few theories about why this has happened. Part of it is definitely the death of religion in both our countries, but part of it is also the death of political reasoning that was brought about by the Cold War, in my opinion. I think that we just lost our ability to reason about these things, to talk sense about the economy without either going the rah-rah capitalism, everything big business does is wonderful, or rah-rah everything has to come from the state. There are a few middle positions that also kind of make sense. You know what I'm saying? And it's like I'm struck by something you said a while ago, when most of the people who talk like you, and if you talk to people in my family, I grew up in a working class household, son of immigrants. My parents, all my parents' friends, I remember them talking about things like welfare. And they were really, really upset about their paychecks getting eviscerated, right, to feed the welfare state. But they all agreed that they wanted there to be a safety net. And I'm struck by something you said. You said, yeah, of course, we should have something that keeps people from disaster on the back of, they've had some bad luck or what have you. So what I'm getting at is, people will get on their hind legs and accuse you of being unkind, of hating the poor, of not liking the poor. And it's like, no. All of us understand that we have an obligation to our fellow citizens. The question is how best to fulfill the obligation, because it doesn't, just starting out with good intentions doesn't guarantee that you're going to have good outcomes. And very often, if you have good intentions and strong feelings and you're not careful, you'll get terrible outcomes, worse than otherwise, because you won't be paying attention to the outcomes because you'll be thinking about your intentions, which don't matter.
And this happens all the time, as in, humans, we need to admit that we're stupid. We don't understand everything, and nobody understands why humans do what humans do. So to think that we can create a social project and we understand how that's going to make other humans act in the future is absolutely crazy. That doesn't mean we don't try, but it means we should be evaluating it all the time and making adjustments all the time to try to get the outcome we're looking for, not creating the project and then constantly throwing more money at it because it doesn't seem to be working. But if it's not working, it's not working. Change the project instead of just thinking it's because. And you ask government departments all the time, what's the one thing you need to make this government department work better? There's only one answer, and it's a bigger budget.
A bigger budget, more money.
That's all they ever say, a bigger budget.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely crazy. And that's something, like I say, both our countries seem to suffer from. So it seems we have a lot in common when it comes to the political arena in both our countries. What else do you think we have in common?
Well, I mean, there's that saying that we're two people separated by a common language, right? We have the history of of the English language. We have the history of our literature, there's a sense in which we are, I mean, your country is the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. And you could say that after you guys, the United States is the most, what could you say? It's the most direct descendant of the Industrial Revolution in a sense. You know, it's the country that took the Industrial Revolution and ran the farthest and fastest with it in a way. You know, I think that's very interesting. More importantly, or more foundationally, I think we have a fundamental, how can I say this? Well, look, we have, you know, you all don't have a formal constitution that's written all in one document. But what's interesting about our constitution, right, is that there's a body of law within it called the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. And this body of law is somewhat unique in the history of laws, because most laws tell the citizen what he or she must or must not do. This law tells the state what it must not do. And that's extraordinary. Now, where does that come from? Well, it seems to me you can draw a line between that and the Magna Carta. And that's a long and crooked line, but it's a line nonetheless. And I think that's fascinating. You know, the whole tradition of English common law, this is the thing that we have a lot more in common with, right? We got all these academics in our higher institutions, right? Lusting after these, you know, French postmodernists and you know, German skeptics and eugenicists and all these weirdos. But it's like, that's not our tradition, really. We come more from the English common law tradition. What are the rights of man? What rights does man have? All of them, except, which is a very different stance from the French, how the French do it, where it's like, what rights does a man have? Well, let me check in the book.
Yeah, you have all the rights the state gives you.
With all the rights the state gives you. We don't get down like that. No, I have all the rights, period. And then we'll dial some back to make the whole thing workable, right? And so this is a thing that I don't think we talk about this enough as you know, as Americans and as Brits. You know, this is a tradition we share, and it's important. And it doesn't mean we're perfect. It obviously doesn't mean that we've always lived up to those ideals. I know very well, I don't need any lectures from any grad students with pink hair about how the British used to be colonialists and what have you. But you know something? It's like history, that's just the way history is. History is violent. History is bloody, okay? And all civilizations are the result of some act of violence or other. That's because that's the way humans are. But it seems to me that the only thing that makes all this worth it is a system that kind of works. Do you know what I'm saying? And this is the same system that our lefty brethren are doing everything they can to destroy right around us. And I'm sorry, we can't have that.
We should only compare countries to other countries that exist. We shouldn't,
right.
We shouldn't compare countries to your dream of utopia, of how you would have it running if you was a god, because that's an unfair comparison. We need to compare, let's say, the British Empire to other countries at that time.
Yes.
And believe me, when it comes to every other empire and every other country at that time, the British Empire was the most beneficial, the most kind, and they did some horrendous things, but compared to everybody else, they didn't.
Yeah, I have to say this, Gene, I've talked to cats. I used to hang out with some guys who were actually Vietnamese, like from Vietnam, you know, and they, you know, we the United States, we had a kind of imperial adventure in Vietnam, you know, notoriously, right? And we used to like, you know, drink and talk about this stuff. And they were like, he told me, I never forget, he told me one time, he said, you know, like, It's like, no, we don't really like you Americans. Like, we don't really hate you guys. Like, yeah, we got into it. We had to fight. You tried to give us a government we didn't want, but we didn't really hate you guys. He was like, the French. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, no, we hate those bastards. And so thinking about, again, going back to, the British Empire. Yeah, you guys used to roll up in places and say, hey, we would like these jewels, run these jewels right now. But, at least you guys built railroads. Damn. I look at when I think about the Victorians, right, rolling up in some Saharan African country, telling everybody to run the jewels or else. But at the same time, building infrastructure, building railroads and power plants and schools and what have you. I contrast that to the modern lefty, getting off a plane in some African country with a slightly dopey expression. And they're all full of respect for the culture, but they don't want anyone to build anything.
Yeah. And they're thinking to themselves, wouldn't Africa be great if they could all just live in huts again?
Exactly.
And we could accept 50% child mortality because they'd be living in huts and being closer to nature. And a lot of what comes from the left is just pure condescending. And you could class it as racism as well.
Of course. I've been complaining about this even since before I left the left. Even when I was a lefty, I used to brace people, be like, hey, why every time you talk about going, quote unquote, back to Africa or going to Africa to, quote unquote, help, you never want to go to a city and like train professionals. You never want to go to like a city and train, like, they have like graphic designers, they have web developers, they have chemical engineers, they have architects over there, they have like actual real infrastructure and stuff, but you're never interested in that. You always want to go to some part where it's like, subsistence economy and people kind of like scratching out a living and they're living in huts and what have you. What does that say about you?
That says that they want to be Gandhi or Mandela.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. I want to be a superhero. And I feel I'm better than those people. So maybe I could be a superhero.
Yeah, but you see that's the thing. They never go into parts. I noticed they never go into parts of Africa where people, like, these cats never want to go to Lagos where every other person in the street has 2 cell phones. Right? Or you would never want to go to Addis Ababa where they're really, grinding on infrastructure and build out and what have you, and trying to really supercharge that country, because there, people might look at you and ask some very pointed questions that you don't know how to answer.
You'll be classed as a Western idiot.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, I just came to help you. Help us do what? What skill sets do you have? So this is the modern left, and again, there's so many things. I know we've got a lot of ground to cover, but there's so many things where when I look at it, it's not as if I think that the right has all the answers. But at this point in my life, I'm looking at things where it's like, okay, this here is obviously wrong. Okay, I don't have the perfect solution. Okay, far be it for me to ever say I have a perfect solution to anything, but Jesus Christ, I know what not good enough looks like. And this is not good enough.
I think the difference now between a left and a right is the right has no answers and the left have all wrong answers. And that's not a good situation for us to be in.
Not at all. That's right.
Right, so let's move on. I was quite surprised when you reached out because you had lots of followers and lots of friends and lots of contacts in the UK. Could you tell me about that and what sort of things are you doing with people in the UK?
Sure. The reason I had all those friends and followers in the UK, if there is one reason above any other, it's James Sellingpole. Really, I mean, my Twitter following was pretty much I'd start. Well, let me back up a second. I had, after I found myself politically homeless, okay, I think there were a lot of how you could say signposts on the way, but I think the Occupy Wall Street debacle was really I think that was just about that was really the beginning of the end. So when I left the left, right, I didn't lurch right because, again, the right didn't seem to be they also didn't seem to be serious enough, but they were unserious in different ways. So I had to go and do a lot of thinking and whatnot. And eventually I decided to start something called Foundationism, the Foundationist Society. And that was kind of a what I thought was a necessary kind of mental discipline that would allow people to have better arguments and make higher quality mistakes when they talk about these things. It's not a religion, it's just a self-focused discipline. And we have a 10-point manifesto and all that good stuff. And so I started reaching out to people and doing my little podcasts, and I opined about this or that and what have you. And I said, okay, I need a Twitter account. So I spun up a thing on Twitter and what have. Okay, so I was doing all that. And but there was never really any big response to it. And that was okay, right? Because I was trying to build something. I knew I was in for the long haul. So I wasn't chasing clicks or likes or anything like that. But I used to read a lot of different people. And I really, even though I wasn't a particular fan of Breitbart, I really liked Delingpole. And then I'd listen to his podcast, what have you. And at a certain point, I just started kind of reaching out to him. I think I emailed him or something. And eventually I said, hey, we should do a talk. You should come on, I should come on my pod. You should come on my podcast. I should come on yours, what have you. And I guess, we made that happen. And that first episode that we did was apparently was a big hit, because all of a sudden my Twitter following started skyrocketing, and I saw all these English cats were like, hey, this is really good. I like this. These guys are talking sense. So that was the beginning of my UK following. I had reached out before that, by the way, to a lot of American conservatives, right? But it's just that none of them ever, like James was the first person to really reach back out to me, So a lot of the guys who you see, and I'm not knocking them necessarily, maybe they were just busy, okay? But a lot of these young conservatives online, young Black conservatives that are very prominent, God bless them for it. That's great. It's like, I reached out to them. They weren't interested. James Delingpole was the first person who was like, hey, let's talk, And so, yeah, it was wonderful. And that was the beginning of everything. And then it kind of like, I felt like I had a group of kindred spirits with me, and then we were going through it together. Like I was there on the Brexit thing, and I was looking at that, and then, the Black Lives Matter thing, and the COVID freak out and all that stuff. It's like it feels like I've had I've been on the road with a procession of pilgrims all this time. That's what it feels like. It's like a modern day Canterbury Tales.
No, that's great. And I'll put all the details in the description of this video of your Foundational Society, your podcast, your Twitter, your radio station. I can put all that in there. So if anyone's interested, go in the description, you'll find it all in there.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So this is it's really mostly attributable to Delingpole that I have all these UK people in my corner.
So I've just mentioned your radio station. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, this is right now it's a technology trial, but it's fully functional. So the idea is this, right? Anyone who's been listening to me for any amount of time knows that at the drop of a hat, I'll start boring people about building independent social media infrastructure. I think this is really important, right? Because we know Twitter is censoring people, Facebook censoring people, Instagram, whatever. We all know this. It's to the point where it's always been unacceptable, but now it's become intolerable because they're censoring the truth, and they're censoring the truth specifically on the word of national governments. We know this.
I mean, if they can kick off social media, the sitting president of the United States,
right?
Then they can kick anyone off at any time.
Right. And the thing is, it's one thing if you say, well, it's a private company and they have, okay, you know something? Wonderful. They're a private company. But here's the thing. I think what that means is that whole system needs to be disrupted. That's what that means. They're too big for their britches. Just a sidebar before I go on, part of the problem with these people the Facebooks of the world and so on, is that they don't really know what they are, right? You see, Mark Zuckerberg, apart from not being a real man, apart from having no honor and no code and no soul and no integrity, apart from all that, his problem, he doesn't know what his company is. Okay. He doesn't know.
It was all a coincidence and a fluke. These tech giants fluked. I'm not saying they're stupid by any means. They're not stupid people. I'm not saying they don't deserve what they have, but they didn't sit down and plan to be billionaires and own infrastructure that could change the world. They fluked all that.
That is correct. That was a fluke. And it was mostly, it's not even down to his particular engineering expertise. This was an idea that had already been built by someone else. Okay, so fair enough. He saw the potential and he was able to make some business moves and make this. Okay, wonderful. Now, the problem today is that he doesn't know what Facebook is. Is it a telecommunications company or is it a publishing company? Because you see, if it's a publishing company, then it gets to have an editorial opinion. Sure. There's certain things a Spectator is not going to publish because it's a Spectator. Fair enough. Okay. And on the other hand, if it's a communications company, then what it needs to do is carry my communications traffic and mind your business. That's what you need. You see what I'm saying? But and conversely, if you want to carry my comms traffic, but you have an editorial opinion, well, then you should do what other publishers do, shouldn't you? And pay your content creators. Oh, but you don't want to do that. You see what I'm saying? So they don't know what they are, okay? And that's fine. What we need to do, what we can do about it is to create our own infrastructure. So this is a long-winded answer to your question. Radio station, why? The first piece of infrastructure I really spun up was a private chat room. You remember in it. Other people in our circle are members in it. And this was just a thing where it was like Facebook, but it's private. It's based on open source software. It's running on one of my servers. So no one can censor me. No one can take it down. People can get on there and have arguments and speak the truth without worrying that someone is going to, some po-faced censor at Twitter is gonna mark their tweet for deletion or shadow ban them or whatever. So that's good. But I also wanted to build out something where, well, I don't know, maybe like you and a lot of cats who grew up when I did, I've always had this romance with radio. I remember when radio was actually decent, when there used to be DJs as opposed to just a hard drive, streaming music out, right? And there's something about radio, something about a radio station, something about a pirate radio station, independent source, where people of like mind can it's like you're huddling around a campfire, even though you're all in different locations, but you're listening in. And there's something very, I want to say, unifying about that, that I really like.
It's human, because most people forget we're social creatures.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's right. So this is the thing, we have our social media and we have the situation where literally you and I can go on a website and we'll see different versions of the website. But I think it's nice to have something where everyone who tunes in is hearing the same thing. They're having a common experience. That's important. Plus, I love music. I have friends who are into music, who write music, who do this, who do that. Obviously, I have friends who talk politics and this and then. All this stuff can go in the hopper as far as radio broadcast is concerned, and it can be like a real radio station. So I started researching last year. I started researching the packages I'd need. I had done a similar thing before, but on a very small scale. I had actually made a real radio station before with an actual antenna on my chimney, years and years and years ago when I lived in a different neighborhood. But now it's like I saw the internet was the thing. So we spun it up last year. We ran some tests. They were successful, but it just wasn't convenient enough for end users. So more recently, I did some research and found that I could actually make up a web page where the player was embedded in the page. And so all you had to do was go to a page and click a play button, and you were tuning in, and that has worked. So now we're looking at how can we make this into like a news station? How can we get people to look up stories that we're interested in, that the mainstream media is not, and literally just write up those news stories and read them online and be an actual world service. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
No, that sounds really, really exciting, and good luck with that, and
Thank you, brother.
keep me updated. And hopefully in a year's time, come back on the show, and then you can tell me how you've sold it to Disney for £500 million or something.
You better get out of here with that. Oh my God.
Yeah, and Disney now have got the news being read by a Mickey Mouse voice.
Disney, where all good ideas go to die.
Yeah.
That's what Disney is.
What they've done to Star Wars makes me want to cry.
Terrible.
Makes me want to cry what they've done to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, they bought it. People sell stuff all the time, and what can we do?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, this is just another example of how the listen, years ago, decades ago, the counterculture, right, or the left or what have you, at least was good at culture. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you, right, you were hanging out with the lefties back in the day, and at least you get some good music and some good movies and what have you. You don't even get that. So that, I mean, right? It's like y'all can't even tell a good story anymore. Really? You can't tell a good story? Like, I'm sorry, it's
because every character now has to tick three or
4 different boxes. Jesus.
Yeah, and it's just, they're not real characters anymore. I watched the first 3 episodes of the new Lord of the Rings TV series.
Oh boy.
And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that's the first point.
Mm-hmm.
But what really annoyed me was there was too many black women in places where they shouldn't be. One of the elves is a black man, and do you know what? That was fine. That was fine.
But there's like a whole one, man. They're gonna get you, man. They're gonna be all over you for saying that. Man, Nick Buckley says there's too many black women.
There's a black hobbit who's a British comedian called Lenny Henry, who I can't stand, but he actually plays a good part. He was amusing. I quite liked his character. But then there was the king of the dwarfs, this white dwarf, and he's got a black queen. And it's like, why have you got a black queen? I could understand if there was some black dwarfs because they're a different race of dwarfs, but they just seem to be fitting people in to tick a box, and that was a bit that annoyed. It's a bit slow and boring, but the tick boxing had probably annoyed me the most. But it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. I haven't watched it, so I'm not interested. But this is the thing that again, as a black man, not just a black man, I'm what they call a race man, and people need to look that up. Like Frederick Douglass was a race man. Booker T. Washington was a race man. Okay. So as a race man, even, I get annoyed when I look at these franchises or these movies or these retellings of stories or what have you, and I can see that like all of a sudden there's a ton of black people in there, and it's like because it doesn't feel genuine. It's obviously not genuine. I feel like I'm being pandered to. Stop pandering to me. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it really, the box ticking where we gotta have a person who's we gotta have 2 men who are this, we gotta have this, and it's like I can't. I'm just not interested. I'm not interested. Also, because at the end of the day, the people doing this, that you can just see them in the studio with a self-satisfied expression on their face. They think they're quote unquote helping. I'm like, no, you're not. And all you're doing is you're destroying, as far as I'm concerned, things. I believe in institutions. Sometimes institutions have to be disrupted or destroyed, granted, but on the whole, it's better to have institutions. I'm with G.K. Chesterton on this. Never dismantle a structure until you know why it was erected in the first place.
And we tend to do this all the time now. We change something that we have no concept about and then wonder why we get a negative outcome. I didn't see that happening. Well, You didn't look into it enough, did you?
You didn't stop and think. You didn't, exactly, because there's this fundamental, this revolutionary. See, early on, I knew that I didn't want to be a revolutionary, and it didn't mean that I didn't want to change things. But revolutionaries all had this kind of slightly dopey insistence that if they pull something down, something better is going to spring up in its place automatically. Well, why? Why? No.
Hardly ever does something decent and good come out of the ashes.
Exactly. So now you wanna now go and retroactively kind of take over the storyline canon from some respected author, whether it's J.K. Rowling or someone like like an old lion like J.R. Tolkien, what have you. Okay, well, why do you want to do that? Why are you doing that? And there is no good reason. It's just, well, you want to do what? You want to help me? I don't want you helping me.
We need to represent the population in our movies. And it's like, if you're making a movie about Nelson Mandela, I don't need his top guys all to be white or Chinese.
No, we have to resent
because they all should be black.
It only goes one way. That's a very good point. That's right. It only goes one way with them. Yeah.
And with actors, especially like Lord of the Rings, they should be looking at getting the best actor for that role. If the king of the dwarfs in this new Lord of the Rings was Denzel Washington, he'd probably be amazing because he's an amazing actor. We should be picking the best people for the roles, not box ticking.
Yeah, no, this is a thing with them, and again, when you speak out against, it's very easy because for them, because when you speak out against it, right away they say, well, you're a racist. Then there's not many. There aren't that many prominent. I mean, my voice is not a prominent voice, and so there aren't that many prominent Black guys saying why this is bad, why this is just pandering and it's worse than useless. They're not a lot of us saying this, and so
I think there's more than they used to, and I think the race card is losing its power because it's been overplayed and overused. I think lots and lots of more people now going, oh, I don't care what you call me, where 30 years ago it was the biggest insult you ever could have been called.
Yes, although I would say that the problem, at least here in my country, maybe it's to some extent over there, is that because the so-called conservatives are out of ideas, okay, they don't know how to exploit the fact that this weapon, this rhetorical weapon, you're a racist, what have you, that this rhetorical weapon is losing its potency. They keep trying to they do everything they can to make themselves toxic to Black voters, who, again, as we both know, if they work for a living, if they're not in academia or government, if they're just ordinary folks, they are extremely conservative. Now, the same thing is true of your country. I know that for a fact.
Give me an example of something the Republicans have done that has alienated Black conservative voters. I'm curious.
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because how much time you got? Okay, the number one thing is that Republicans have. There's no number one thing. The Republicans have given up on cities. They have indulged in rhetoric that it pretty much implies that people who live in cities, especially Black people living in cities, are not real Americans. So the real America, according to the Republican Party, is somewhere in suburbia. But if I live in New York City, then I'm not a real American. That cities are not the real America. Cities are not worth fighting for politically. Oh, let the liberals have them. Let them burn. Those people deserve what they get, even though I didn't vote for Bill de Blasio or Eric Adams or any of these collection of clowns. And Republicans have developed this really kind of sullen, boring, stupid, kind of a sour attitude toward organized labor. And what I keep trying to get people to understand is that, yes, labor unions can be corrupt, like all human institutions, but very many Black people in America who are in the middle class and own houses and all that stuff, and ordinary kind of stable citizens, got that way through the unions, whether it's the construction unions like my dad and his friends, the trade unions, whether it's the auto workers union, or what have you. They got there through the unions. They're not going to be there for a political party that has made it clear that it is completely hostile to labor unions and organized labor. People don't get that. And then the last thing, I'll pause after this, but the other thing is that, look, the crazy lefties have ruined the term systemic racism, because systemic racism does exist, but it doesn't exist where people think it does. Okay, and it's not meant to be an excuse for wrongdoing. Now, here's an example of systemic racism. After World War II, the US government decided to essentially subsidize subprime mortgages. They said, if you're a GI, you come back, we're going to set aside land and build houses for you, and you can get into one of those houses for little or no money down. Okay, so that was essentially a subprime mortgage, because they thought correctly that it was important to stabilize the country and have a nice, fat, property-owning middle class. Okay, the problem is in many of those places, these land grants, okay, were only available to white GIs, not black GIs. And so what that means is that over time, those neighborhoods where you had those land grants, they had more of a capital cushion. They had more equity. You had a house now, you could borrow against it. You could start a business. You could do this, you could do that. You had more of a financial cushion.
They cared about the neighborhood more because their property was in it.
Owned property. And so when you talk about systemic racism, the answer to why Black neighborhoods, all things being equal, tend to be more undercapitalized than similar white neighborhoods, you could argue that that's a case of systemic racism, because racism connected to housing law, because housing is a long-lived asset, right? That's the thing that becomes part of the system, because a house literally lasts so long. Okay, that's an example. Okay, now, Republicans don't understand this. And therefore, when they talk about things like the free market, when they talk about balancing between balancing between an economy that is vibrant, but that also offers protections for citizens, they talk like rabid libertarians. And the problem is that because many Black folks, for the reasons I've named, don't have as much tolerance. Many middle-class Black folks now don't have as much risk tolerance because they lack that cushion, right? That cushion that was fabricated in the aftermath of World War II. Okay, this is the kinds of rhetoric you hear from Republicans does not resonate with us as much. Now, these are solvable problems, and in my opinion, these are problems that are worth solving if we can knock the liberals off their perch. The liberals are destroying the cities that they are running for the most part. That's a problem. The liberals are destroying our culture and destroying our children. They're advocating the mutilation of children. That is a problem. Do you want to cry about how Black people won't vote Republican because Black people must all want free stuff, which is a slander and a lie? Or do you actually want to solve the problem? Come talk to me like a normal human being, respectfully. Ask for my vote, ask. But you're not going to insult us. They're not going to insult us into voting for them. And that's what they think, and that's why they keep losing.
And we have the same problem in the UK, where different politicians will insult whole rafts of voters. And they may be correct, as in 80% of them wouldn't vote them anyway, but 20% of them would have done. And that's a building base.
Correct. Correct.
Again, a lot of this is just short-termism, where
Yes.
all I'm fighting is the next election. I don't care about overturning the Black vote in 15 years' time.
Yes, sir.
But you know what? You should be aiming for that as well. Long-termism to be a successful party. Like I say, we have the same problem here. No, thank you very much, Cara Mike. It's been a fantastic conversation. And thank you for coming on the third episode. Hopefully, I'll have you back in a few months and we can see about your radio station. And to all the listeners, please look at the description to get all Mike's details and everything he's doing. There'll be links to all of it in there. And hopefully, I'll see you again in next week. And once again, big thanks, Mike, for coming on.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.